adopt that?
Yes, please.
Representative Evans moves to adopt House Committee Amendment number 2. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, say no. The ayes have it. House Committee Amendment number 2 is adopted. Representative Martwick on House Bill 2267 as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the committee. House Bill 2267 is my ongoing initiative to provide an elected representative school board for the Chicago Public Schools. We have passed this in 2 prior years. This bill was twice passed at the General Assembly with overwhelming majorities. I believe the last time it passed it was somewhere around 110 to 4 was the vote, I believe. So basically what this bill would do is it would take the current 7-member board that is appointed by the mayor of the city of Chicago. A little bit of history. In 1995, the General Assembly gave the mayor of the city of Chicago authoritarian control over the board. Did not give him, they basically, unlike many appointed positions where the executive appoints members to a board that are then subject to confirmation and oversight by the appropriate legislative authority, that does not exist in Chicago. The Chicago Public School Board serves entirely at the will of the mayor of the city of Chicago. Chicago Public Schools have experienced a number of problems throughout the years since that has happened. And I'm not suggesting that this bill would change that or guarantee better outcomes, but what it would do is it would allow the Chicago Public Schools to conform to the most basic principle of democracy, and that is no taxation without representation. In 2015, there was a hearing held, there was a referendum held in Chicago, and over 90% of the people who voted on that question said that they want an elected representative school board so that they can have the same elected accountability over the performance of their schools, over the decisions of their board members that every other citizen in the state enjoys. A couple of notes. House Committee Amendment number 2 would allow for the first election for the board to happen in 2023. That would be in conjunction with the consolidated municipal election that Chicago will be having at that time. Additionally, what it does is it provides, there's a provision in there for a sunset provision, in a sense, that says that the board will operate for 6 years, and that the legislature must act 9 years, 8 years,
4 years.
Yes. Hold on a second. I'm sorry. They would be elected twice. They would be elected, but it is 2029, so it is 6 years. So the legislature has until June 30th, 2029 to reauthorize the board. If not, it would revert to a 7-member mayor-appointed board. This is a speed bump, as many people have. When we first brought this to committee in was a couple years ago, with the discussions with most members and the concerns that most members had back then, and I think continue to have today, is what will be the influence of money and special interest groups over these elections. And so basically what this does is this allows the legislation to come back to the legislature for review and revision so that we can ensure that the structure of democracy and accountability is functioning the way that we hope it. And if not, then the legislature will have the ability to make changes and clean that up and ensure good performance for the citizens and students of the city of Chicago. I'm happy to answer any questions. Details of the bill, in case anyone's not specific, this would divide the city of Chicago up into, because given its size, again, to limit the influence of outside money and to ensure that all parts of the diverse fabric of the city of Chicago have proper representation on the board. The structure of the board calls for the city to be segmented into 20 representative districts that will then be elected by constituents within those districts, and there will be one elected school board president who will run at large in the entire city. The legislature would draw the first maps, and then I believe the school board would draw its own questions, I answer them.
Just for the record, we have 102 proponents, 0 opponents to the bill. Representative Wheeler, will you reading of the 102 proponents? Questions?
Mr. Chairman, well, I would prefer if there was no opponents. I believe that the gentleman sitting to my left is here to beg to differ with you and me on that.
Did you file a slip?
Yes, sir, I'm in.
All right, it's not on the list, but I'm going to allow you to testify, sir. Give your name for the record.
Derek Blade on behalf of the city of Chicago in opposition house.
Okay, so we do have one opponent. Proceed.
Mr. Chairman, very briefly, we have debated the merits of substantially similar proposals before this committee and others over the past 2 years. 2 minor corrections that I would like to bring to the committee's attention. This is not the same bill that has been considered in the past. Is it substantively the same? The answer is yes. But with the 8-year 2-election language found in the bill, it is different. There was also no citywide referendum in the city of Chicago on this. It's my recollection that those referendum questions were placed in individual precincts as individual persons. It's also my recollection that when the question was asked, the bill did pass, it was individual precincts. I cannot represent anything else about it. I would suggest today this amendment is premature. It's premature because under the proposed language of the amendment, there is 1,505 days between today and the day on which the current board of elections terms would expire. Surely we can wait 55 days until the next mayor of the city of Chicago is inaugurated. It's my understanding both candidates that will appear on the ballot next Tuesday are in favor of changing the current structure of the Board of Education. I think this committee should give the next mayor, whomever she may be, the opportunity to have fruitful discussions with the sponsor of this amendment, with other interested parties, and obviously the legislature as a whole before we make a change like this out of respect for the new mayor and the procedural process itself. I must urge a no vote today on House Amendment number 2.
Thank you, Mr. Blada. Any questions? Mr. Walters, do you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative, I voted for House Bill 1774 in the 100th General Assembly. What's prompted the change from 1774 to what is presented today?
So discussions with members and advocates, concerned parties. In fact, Representative, when this went initially through the first committee process, there was much concern from members of your party about what could be done to ensure that we didn't have conflicts of interest and that we were limiting the influence of money and special interests over these elections. And at that time, your membership in the Education Committee made 6 suggestions or changes to the bill, 3 of which were adopted in this bill. But again, this is a sort of continuing concern about what will be the influence of money over these elections, and to ensure that this doesn't spin out of control. This creates an automatic review and revised process so that we can, the legislature can make sure that it doesn't get away from us.
So we're only concerned about the influence of money in politics in Chicago school board elections.
No, I think we shouldn't be anywhere, but I think that this is, so understand that the city of Chicago, the Chicago Public Schools have never had an elected school board. And so when you take the largest school district in the state and you make this sort of change, you want to make sure that we're guarding against this. For instance, the city of Los Angeles has a similar measure. And, I don't know, I imagine people could argue about the outcomes, but I would suggest that the actual outcome was perhaps different than was predicted, and to ensure that one side or another does not buy up these elections or overly influence these elections. We always have the ability to do this, but this creates a sweep up, an automatic return for review.
Who recommended the change from to just having 2 4-year terms as opposed to how it was in the previous General Assembly?
As I said, this was it wasn't really that anyone asked for that. It was just sort of continuing discussions around the concern over the influence of these elections and what the outcomes would be. So this was just sort of a provision that was came up, that was brought up as an idea, well, maybe what we ought to do is put it in a review.
So can I read this as having that room 300 is now supporting term limits? Because you're only having 2 terms before we have to take a look at this again?
I'm not sure I know what you're talking about.
Well, that's a nice smile on your face there. Well, so if I understand this correctly, I think you mentioned that the legislature actually draws the maps for these districts, correct?
Yeah, around the initial discussions, the question was who would be best suited to draw the maps. My decision was, a number of different options were brought up, right? So you can't have the school board draw the maps because it doesn't exist yet, right? Number 2, the thought was you wanted to have someone who has the infrastructure in place to be able to draw maps. And so the 2 most obvious infrastructures for drawing maps would be the city of Chicago or the state of Illinois. And by my purview, having people like yourself weigh in on the drawing of the legislature or the maps for the school district means that it's one step away from the influence of the personal politics, right? If it's just the city council drawing the maps, then maybe there'd be a little bit more concern about how these lines drawn to best benefit the need. Where I think that's removed with the legislation.
I may argue that I probably will not have a lot of say in drawing those maps, given the track record of the Illinois General Assembly when it comes to drawing maps. My suggestion would be, and I don't know if they could legally do this, maybe we should engage the state board of elections to assist in drawing maps, maybe look at a third-party, nonpartisan entity, as has been suggested statewide, to help us draw legislative maps. Do you know, other than the congressional maps and the legislative maps, has the General Assembly, has the General Assembly ever gotten involved in drawing maps on any other level?
Yes, in fact, I think we do. I believe we draw the county board of review maps. I think the legislature does that as well.
The one entity.
So there are other instances, and again, as you can imagine, Representative, my biggest interest here is to bring about an elected representative school board.
I agree with you.
And what I don't want to do is try and reinvent the wheel, so to speak. So I was trying to use existing infrastructure, and to me, it made the most sense to have people who are not personally involved in the outcomes weighing in on these maps.
What assurances do we have after these 2 terms that they will continue to be elected?
Well, I don't know that we do. I think, obviously the language in here makes it, puts that up in the air. There is no guarantee. What my suggestion would be is that, or what I would suggest to you is that as someone who is a resident of the city of Chicago, I would tell you that this is an extremely popular initiative in the city of Chicago. This is something that the residents of the city of Chicago have been clamoring for over a decade. And there have been a large number of advocacy groups that have grown up entirely around advocating for an elected representative school board so that they have elected accountability over the operation of their school district. And so I don't imagine that that's going to end. I think that this is really more of a safeguard and a review and revise, but I can't imagine the legislation not reauthorizing that, which is why I'm willing to put that in there. I wouldn't do it if I thought it was going to go.
I support what you're doing. You've heard my concerns. I think this could be a much better bill. I like the bill that we voted on in the 100th General Assembly better than this one. I think this is a step backwards, very honestly. And I'm going to support your bill because I agree with you 100%. I think this should be an elected school board. Thank you.
Representative Davis, Martwick.
So you're going from 7 current members that are appointed by the mayor to 20 members that will be elected.
Technically, 21.
21 members. Oh, yeah. So what's the compensation for these individuals?
There is no
Currently, there's no compensation at all.
No.
Okay. The other question I have is, the state of Illinois currently has a law that says if you have over $50,000 in contracts with the state of Illinois, that you cannot donate to the governor's race because that is the individual who executes the contract. Have you looked at a similar idea to ensure that there there's an undue influence by individuals who are directly affected by the contracts that the school board would be executed.
Yes, and this was when we first ran this bill through the Education Committee in response to concerns from your members about that. We added provisions that prohibit CPS district employees, contractors, and employees of contractors from serving on the board. Former board members cannot contract with or work for a contractor of CPS for 1 year following termination of their employment with legal companies.
But they can still donate, correct?
I'd have to go through the bill. I thought we put something in the provision-wise. I have staff check on that and get back to you.
Is that something you'd be willing to look at?
Limiting campaign contributions, absolutely, absolutely. Trust me when I say this, that my biggest concern about this is that the influence of money.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Representative Wheeler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Two quick things for you, Bob. One, how did you get 20 as the number of the budget interest?
So the idea was, and I would tell you that there was no scientific method, but the idea is that the city of Chicago is incredibly diverse, and what we wanted to ensure was that there was minority representation, geographic representation, to make sure that every group, and the city of Chicago broken out by neighborhoods has dramatically different interests, literally from one neighborhood to the next. And so the idea was to ensure as much of that diversity on the board as we could find. My initial idea was to have one school board member per ward, which would be 50. I got pushback on that. I still think it would be a good idea because then there would be no drawing of maps, and we get things done with 50 on the city council. But there was pushback because of too many, and so I came with 20.
I understand, you know, 20, like 140,000 roughly per.
Right, very similar to our districts.
District and somewhere between the.
Yeah.
You all know this is somewhat natural. The second thing I was going to say is there any other school boards in Illinois that have a district-based representation, or are they all at large size?
I am not a Sure.
But yeah, I was going to say, this, how they, I was going to say, to me, I mean, that we, but there's no approach. Just put it on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, Representative Willis moves to pass on House Bill 2267 as amended. Do we have a leave? Do we have a leave? Leave being granted. On vote